Hey everyone. Hi. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Alison Rosen is your new best friend. I am delighted to bring in my guest in a moment, but first I must say hello and catch up with you guys and explain that even though producer Tony Thaxton is back in town and I recorded in person with him the other night, he is not here for this recording because he is at a wedding. I was listening to a motivational speaker, life coach kind of person on Instagram the other day. Listening to is too strong. That makes it sound like I decided to devote my time to this person. And it's more like I was scrolling through and it caught my eye. And she was like, there's 3 things you need to learn and you need to really take in. And once you take these things in, your life will change. And I forget what 2 of them are, but one of them was if they wanted to, they would. So to Tony Thaxton and the Tony Thaxtons out there, I just have to say, if you wanted to be here, you would. And if you wanted to be here for the duration of your rock tour, you would have. And if you had wanted to be here for your other rock tour, you would have, Tony. So I am left to draw the conclusion that you didn't want to be here. And I don't know how that makes me feel. I'm going to sit here and think about it because I think silence works well on an audio podcast. However, if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, youtube.com/Alison Rosen, please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell so that you get alerts when I take action on YouTube. And you can see my face as I think about how it makes me feel. Although on the most recent, some number of episodes ago, but recently I decided that I don't care anymore, Tony. I'm done being invested in your Tony Thaxton games. Okay. And that's why I can talk so openly about it. Because if I cared, I wouldn't be able to talk about it because I would feel embarrassed that I'm laying it all out there because it's making me vulnerable and it seems desperate and pathetic. Only someone who's over it would be able to be so emotionally revealing. Hence, clearly, I'm done caring about it, which is why I can be so transparent.
Alison, Rosen, Alison's your new best friend.
Okay. I'm very, very excited to welcome my guest. This is someone that I go way, 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 but not that way far back because we're both very young. We're a couple of up-and-coming whippersnapper ingenues making waves. As you might know, if you listen to my show lately, I have realized that I can no longer do intros. I've been doing the show for a very long time, but lately every time I try to introduce a guest, it just doesn't go well. So I'm just going to bring him in and then we're just going to explain who it is. Please put your hands together for my good friend, Mark Armstrong.
Hi, Alison.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
I don't know what happened. It just very recently when I try to introduce a guest, it just comes out all jumbled. I try to give their credits, then I give their name, and then I realize I've done it in the wrong order. But anyway, you're a journalist. And also you founded Longreads, which is a big deal and everyone's heard of it. And then you sold Longreads and now you're doing Ursa, which is a podcast featuring short stories from underrepresented voices. You've lived all over. And also you played in a band. You know why? It's too many things. That's why it's hard to boil it all down into your essence. But that's what we're going to do today, Mark.
That's wonderful. You boiled it down perfectly. That was wonderful. But I think we need to go back to our beginning, how we know each other.
I know.
Is that a useful backstory?
Yeah, I think so. So
Okay.
I had just moved to New York. It's kind of crazy. I was thinking about it earlier. I was thinking, because my listeners, pretty much know my story, but you represent a little bit of a link from Orange County to New York. I met you in New York, but I met you via a friend that connects me from my college life through my back in Orange County. I mean, it's crazy how our friendship your and my friendship has like these friendship roots that go back pretty far. So anyway, in New York, my friend JR, who I know from magazine writing, and that went all the way through college, was getting married, and he was getting married in New Hampshire, and you were going to the wedding as well. So I didn't know you, but we carpooled, and that's how I met you. And then we became friends, and we've been friends ever since, except there's a big chunk where we weren't in touch, and now we're reconnecting on the podcast. Yeah,
I think this is going to be an interesting conversation because we haven't actually talked, I would say, in at least 15 years.
Oh my God, has it been that long?
I feel like, okay,
that's upsetting.
My vague recollection is that I feel like the last time we chatted
on the street,
and I didn't know if I was talking
on a
to you.
stoop in Brooklyn.
Okay, I got it exactly right. Because I was like, was I talking to Alison on the phone while we were having a stoop sale in Brooklyn, or did she actually walk by? And
Yes.
So you actually walked by. So that was it. That was probably like 2009. Our first child was born.
Yeah.
And we ended up staying in New York another 3 years after that. But did you go to LA right after that?
Yeah, I moved back in 2010. But when I ran into you on the street in Brooklyn, it had already been a little while since we had been in close contact.
Yep, definitely.
Because I know that it was like, oh my God, Mark, like, what have you been up to?
What are you doing in Brooklyn?
Yeah. And then, and you already had, you had a child and a wife, and it was like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's been a long time since we chatted. And then, but the first time we met, so I moved to New York. I was living in LA, and I moved to New York 2 weeks before 9/11.
Oh my God.
But that's a whole other thing. When I moved, my friend JR, who I worked with, and his girlfriend. Did you guys
work at E?
We worked at E Online.
Mm-hmm.
And his girlfriend, soon to be wife Mara, they both just like brilliant music people who knew everything about music. And so they hooked me up with just this entire shoebox full of burned CDs for my trip to New York. And so like they introduced me to Elbow, they introduced me to, so I brought those burned CDs on our wedding carpool trip. And I remembered that I was playing, I love this band. They're this sub pop band called Arlo. And I was just like gushing about them. Yeah. I don't know what happened to them either, but they, but you're like, they're playing at the Mercury Lounge, and I think I know the Sub Pop guys, so I can get you tickets. And so that was like the beginning of our friendship there.
Did I go to that show? Or did I just get you tickets? Okay.
You might have just gotten me tickets.
The funny thing is that, so I know a guy who I believe either played in a band with Arlo, or like either played in Arlo, or his band played on bills with Arlo. And I did, after you and I emailed today, I did tweet him today to find out like whatever happened to Arlo. So I'm hot on the trail of finding out what happened to Arlo.
I would love to find out because I really enjoyed them. I
was listening to them today after you mentioned it in an email. Yeah. So we became friends. You played in a band. This was back in 2002 that we met. It's funny because when I think about my time in New York, I like to think about like some of my later years in New York when I feel like I was working at like Time Out New York. I started going on television. I kind of like hit my stride. I wasn't struggling as much. And then I created Alison Rosen as Your New Best Friend. And I just found my place a little more versus 2002.
Were you freelancing?
Yes. And I was living in a sublet, and I didn't have it was like right when I got there, and it was so hard and it was so hot. And I don't even think I had discovered Japanese straightening yet for my hair. So like I had a bad hair situation going on. I had purchased this like loud rhinestone crucifix, and then I realized like this is not who I am, and I returned it. I mean, I really didn't know who I was yet. I think that's when I met you. And then also I and I think it's okay to talk about this. Like, I briefly dated the drummer of your band. Remember?
That's right. Yes.
Please, youtube.com/Alison Rosen to see your face when I just said that. And I mean, I was just like a sloppy gal at that time. I just didn't know what I was doing.
Well, I feel like that was, New York in your 20s, which many people have done. I mean, I think that is the time in which you're trying to figure out what you're doing. And then.
And I was doing it all.
Yeah. Well, then you end up meeting all of these people. And then here you are like 20 years later and you see all these people and all the interesting things they've gone off and done and places they've ended up. And just like a lot of great memories, obviously, like, a lot of embarrassing memories too.
Oh my God. I spilled alcohol. Now I can't remember if this happened with your drummer or with you. And if it happened with your drummer in your room, I'm sorry, there's nothing sexual about this story. But I spilled alcohol and I tried to sop it up with a piece of bread. Do you remember this at all?
I don't remember that.
Okay. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't leave a mess in your room.
We can cut this part out.
I think it was at a New Year's Eve party. I was like, I don't have anything to clean this up with. No, we're keeping this in. This is gold. Anyway, so yes, just because my listeners know my whole story, what I'm referring, when I talk about just being sloppy, what I'm referring to, like they know that I had like a, I was a late bloomer and I went to New York and I was like, I'm going to make up for lost time by experimenting with like everything. So what I'm talking about is like my sort of just being a little out of control times. And that was those times. And I'm, embarrassed by all of that. Anyway. Okay, so you remind me where you went to college?
So I grew up in California. I grew up in Fresno, went to college at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo.
Right.
Studied journalism there. After college, moved to my first job was as a newspaper reporter in Palm Springs. And so I worked in Palm Springs for a bit, and then a job opened up in LA. I was doing like hard news, like covering city council and things like that. But it was kind of like either go to the next size newspaper in Riverside, California, or go do something else. And I wanted to go to LA. And so sort of switched into entertainment and of course like .com, digital media boom and all of that stuff happening. Ended up getting a job at E, and that's where I met JR. And spent a year in LA, and I was, a California kid, and I thought I would spend, a long time in LA. I liked LA and I liked California. And then a job opportunity opened up in New York, and they offered me that. And I initially turned it down because I was just comfortable in LA. And one of my bosses, took me to lunch at the In-N-Out burger truck and just said, what are you doing? If someone is offering to move you to New York, you go to New York.
Right.
And so that's when I moved to New York, and that was 2001. And then worked in digital media.
And that was
around
also
the same time you and I met.
That was also at E?
I was at E for a while, and then I ended up at Time Inc. at People, which is where I met the co-founder of Ursa, Dawnie Walton. So I met Dawnie around the same time I met you. So Dawnie and I were both working in digital media at Time Inc. And she had gone off after that. She worked in digital media for a while and then went off to get her MFA at the Iowa Writers Workshop, MFA in creative writing. And so she went off, wrote a novel. Her debut novel came out last year, The Final Revival of Opal and Nev, and made a big splash. Obama picked it as one of his favorite books of the year.
Obama?
Yeah, President Obama.
Not familiar.
And then I went off and, continued in digital media, worked in startups, and then started Longreads back in 2009. And that was first like a Twitter account and a hashtag, basically.
So take me through that, because I remember your time at People. I actually did I did a little bit of writing for you at People. I remember waking up early in the morning.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And then I remember one morning forgetting to wake up and feeling terrible. The way that worked was like, you would wake up super early and file stories, but then like I slept through my alarm one morning and that was not cool. I'm painting a terrible picture of ice.
I don't remember that. I thought you did great.
Thank you. I think that I think it ended up being fine, but I think like this was pre-text. I think you called me and you're like, where are you? And I'm like, oh, fuck. So I don't think I actually missed it.
We didn't even have Blackberries yet.
No, I know. Just a regular old telephone, maybe. Yeah, I think I don't, like I said, I don't think I actually missed a deadline, but I think I just didn't wake up at the time that I was supposed to and get you the thing at the time, but it ended up being fine. But okay, so you were at people.com. So that would have been like, this was before I was at Time Out New York. So this would have been maybe 2004, 2000. Yeah, 2000. I started there at end of 2004. So this was like 2004 probably. So
Okay.
Then 2004, then where did you go? Or like how long did you stay at People?
I was at People probably till 2007.
Okay, and
like
you were
that.
doing People online?
Yep, people.com, and that was like the era of, you know, going head to head with TMZ, and like
Yeah.
I just like that was just the early 2000s gossip blog explosion.
How were you
And-
feeling about it?
Oh, terrible. I mean, at the time I felt terrible too. I left there vowing to never, you know, work in, celebrity media or entertainment media ever again. I learned a lot just about digital media and worked with a lot of great people. And, but I came out of that, you know, knowing that I wasn't going to do anything like that again. And it was like a 24-hour job at that time too.
Right.
Because there'd always be something going on or something that would need to be posted. And I thought that was not really a way to live one's life.
It's interesting because I would say that people.com is not as salacious as some, like say was also the era my husband Daniel and I were just talking about how back then Gawker was like, as soon as I would sit down at my computer, Gawker was the place my fingers would take me to. I would just instantly type in Gawker, and like there's not now. I guess Twitter is just the place to go. It's like my first landing place, you know. But I would say people.com was not as salacious, right? But still, you felt that it was.
No, I mean,
cheapening the
I
world.
think just in terms of like how things were covered, I thought, you know, everybody was respectful in that way, but the subject matter itself, was not, you know, something that I felt like I needed to be working on.
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, going deep into people's personal lives.
Right. So,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead. So then you left, tell me about the decision to leave.
Yeah. So I left and you know, I was basically burned out and just decided I was going to go, you know, work in other areas of media, other areas of digital content. There were all sorts of things that were still interesting to me in that a lot of things happening on the startup front. So I worked in advertising for a little bit, like digital content strategy, and then ended up at a startup, a personal finance startup called Bundle. And it was like, it was a joint venture of Microsoft and Citibank, and it was essentially like a personal finance site.
Mm-hmm.
And so put together sort of the editorial team for that. And at that time, Tumblr was just starting to become a thing, and Twitter was becoming a thing. This is like 2008, 2009. And so like we staffed Bundle with a bunch of people who like were like really interesting bloggers or creative people that we found on Tumblr or Twitter, essentially. And met so many interesting people. Mike Dang, who worked at Bundle, he ended up working with me at Longreads after that. And it was while I was at that startup that I launched Longreads, just as like an experiment with Twitter, and hashtags were like all the rage. So it was trying to figuring out how could I experiment with that taxonomy around like, you know, getting people to share stuff.
Yeah.
And in that specific instance, it was essays and long form magazine journalism that they liked.
Yeah. Tell me more about that. How did that come about?
That was another New York thing, essentially, where it was, commuting. Like, I feel like a lot of these things are just like you're in a moment and you think of something that you specifically need in that moment. And for me, it was commuting by subway to the bundle offices from Brooklyn to Manhattan. At the time, the subways had no cell phone reception.
Mm-hmm.
And Instapaper was this big thing, which was like a save for later app. And so I was looking for stuff to read, to save on the phone, to read on the commute. And so I just sort of put out there one afternoon. I had the idea in my head for a while, like Longreads. I just liked the phrase Longreads. Mm-hmm. And bought the domain and then sat on it for like 9 months and ended up doing nothing with it. And then one afternoon I was like, you know what, I'm just going to put it on Twitter, see what happens. And it just took off. Like, it was just like a perfect moment because journalists were hungry for it. It was like the thing that journalists absolutely loved. Yeah. And it was within that Twitter environment, when Twitter was a little more innocent. And it kind of took off from there. And then it took off to the point that I then, with a few friends, decided to build it into an actual site and an actual company. And then we ran it independently for the next 5 years. And then it was acquired by the parent company of WordPress, Automatic. Mm-hmm.
So what was interesting, like, to me, from where I sit, it's like, oh my God, Mark Armstrong went out there and has been such a success. He founded Longreads. I don't think I realized until sort of recently that you had stepped away from. Well, you have you stepped away from like, I know you don't own it anymore. Are you still involved in it or no?
No. So I stayed at Automatic for the next 6 years after that. So I stayed there until 2020, and 2020, obviously pandemic. Like, my last day at Automatic was the day before remote school started. So that was like job one. And I was very fortunate to be in a place where I could step away and focus on that. But I also knew that I wanted to start another company again. There was a lot that I thought, it's just like a good time to, like everyone else, the Great Resignation, a time to step away and reassess what we're doing. And so, so after 6 years left, and I had started talking to Dawnie because I always felt like with Longreads, when I first started Longreads, it was supposed to be both nonfiction and fiction. And I think because it was sort of Twitter based and because the journalists were so excited, it kind of got mostly lumped into the sort of journalism side, narrative journalism. And I always felt like there was a lot of unfinished business with short stories and short fiction. And talking to Dawnie's experience coming out of the Iowa Writers Workshop was that she had gotten to know all of these amazing short story writers. And then they come out of their MFA program and the agents all just want novels. And so the whole publishing industry is about novels. And so there's just a massive amount of really great short stories on the internet, though. Like, so many.
Well, wait, can we, let's
pause that?
Yes, let's pause that, because I just want to go back to Longreads for just a second.
Sure.
So what I was saying is, to me, it's like Mark Armstrong, my friend, who I had lost touch with, went out there, created Longreads, which is this thing that is this cultural force. Everyone knows of Longreads. Like, that's amazing. He's such a success. Good for him. And then today I was looking at your website, or your blog, and I was reading this post of yours where you were talking about like some things you learned from Longreads and sort of like what, crowdfunding and rewards and things like that. And the sense I got, tell me if I'm right, was that maybe you, actually, instead of telling you what I think you feel and asking if that's right, I'm just going to ask the question. Do you feel like Longreads do you feel like a success? That's my question.
Oh yeah. I mean, I feel like, I mean, Longreads won a national magazine award, which is like
awesome.
The weirdest thing. Like this thing was a Twitter account and a hashtag. And like to like think of, and it created a space for so many amazing writers and who, you know, then went on to publish books, and we produced a bunch of really great podcasts. And it was just like, I mean, I have, you know, most of my career is, you know, built on the relationships that I made through Longreads. So I think about that. A lot of when I think about Longreads, I think about the people I met through Longreads versus like it itself. You know, it's like a name and a brand. But I'm very proud of what it became. And I wouldn't have imagined it turned into what it did. And I'm so grateful that it's also still around and still running. So no, I mean, that post, I really wanted to share that because, especially in the Substack era and the Patreon era, where the creator economy, where everybody's encouraged to sort of set up a subscription and you only need 1,000 true fans, you know, and then you're all set. And then, you know, everyone's just going to keep paying you forever. And I just wanted to present like a realistic view of like, it is a slog. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
There is churn. And, you know, and it's also when it comes to starting something like that, it really is like you know, there were points when it was independent where, you know, it was not, it's similar to the people.com experience where you're just like not creating boundaries for yourself when you work, not shutting down, especially when you run your own thing. There is no vacation time because it's just sitting in the back of your head if you're not working on it. So that was something, especially when I was like, oh, I'm going to do this again. Like I was like, okay, but like now what kind of habits do we have in place around boundaries, around, you know, personal health and exercise, around your relationships and everybody. Like, I think that was like, that was kind of my point with that post, which is, you know, just thinking about all of the different factors that go into something being sustainable. And, you know, I'm so happy with how it all turned out in terms of Longreads being able to continue on, building into this thing that continues now to this day. So, but I think it was also like, after you sell a company, it is no longer your company. Like, you know, you have sort of limited, there's a limitation, especially if you founded something and you were used to be like, well, we could do whatever we want with this. Like we started this ourselves. There are limitations to that when you have a bigger company comes in, buys it. There are other stakeholders, there are other questions, other things that need resources, stuff like that. So, so that was like 6 years was a good time. I worked on Longreads, but also worked on a lot of WordPress stuff. And so I'm really happy about it. What was your takeaway from reading it? Like, did any of that resonate with you? Because like
go ahead.
Because you have a Patreon, like you have been to me very inspiring in what you have created. And you started doing it very early on. Like the question a question I have for you, and we don't have to answer this now, but it's essentially like, when did you say, I am going to do this Alison Rosen thing?
You know, I don't know that there was ever a specific moment where I was like, I'm going all in on the Alison Rosen thing. But I'm grateful that at some point I converted, because I don't know that like the kind of magazine jobs that we had at one point are there anymore and sustainable.
For sure.
It just sort of gradually happened. And then at some point I was like, oh, I'm doing this. I think that the final kick in the pants for me was probably getting fired from the Adam Carolla show. It was like there was but at that point I was podcasting full time.
Yeah.
but it wasn't independent. You know, I was on his show, and then I was doing Alison Rosen is Your New Best Friend on his network, and then I got the boot, and then I was just, that was this like fire that was lit under my ass. And I was just like, okay, I have no choice but to like instantly get up and running independently. And I didn't even, you know, I didn't miss an episode in terms of my release schedule. So I think that at that point, but like without thinking, okay, I'm all in on me, it just sort of, it happened, but that was probably the thing that like was, I guess, a catalyst. But like I already was.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed like just from the outside, it seemed like before that you had kind of, you had moved a little bit into comedy and sort of being your own, for lack of a better term, personal brand.
Right. Yeah, I guess. I mean, you know, I was already doing Alison Rosen is Your New Best Friend. Like the logo behind me, you know, that was created in New York and the segments were in New York, and I was already doing it as a streaming Ustream show. And I think that when I was living in New York, I had an agent who represented like news people. And then in moving to LA, that's where more of the comedy things were. And that's not why I moved, but it's like that a die was cast a little bit in that regard. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was never a conscious, like, I am going to be my own personal brand. It just kind of happened. And like I said, I'm just kind of like grateful that it did. Although, and I don't know if you have this at all. I hope you don't. But I definitely still have moments where I'm like, I should have done this. I should have gone this way with my career. I should be doing this. What am I doing? What, you know what I mean? Like I still have a lot of like swirling stuff in my head around my career.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like everybody has that. Like I have that for sure. But I think like the thing that from the outside, just like you and the work you do, I feel like it comes very naturally to you.
Oh,
like
thank you.
You being you on the internet comes very natural. Which is someone who I feel like I miss this is going to be like Gen X stories episode, where it's like, as a Gen Xer who missed the entire Instagram selfie era, or it's just like being on camera or like presenting myself on the internet, like did not come naturally to me and like was a source of a lot of anxiety. So like, so I was just like, oh, Alison's just doing it and putting herself out there and presenting herself. And I just like, I appreciate that. But I also wonder if you had sort of had to think about that consciously.
That part I have been doing for so long that it's like, I have been doing it for so long that it's hard for me to get excited about going live on Instagram or streaming on YouTube or all these things that people are doing now. It's like, I was doing it when it was Ustream, or I was doing it on the streets of Brooklyn in 2010. So Periscope is defunct at this point, but it's like all these things, or Twitch or all this stuff. I don't even understand Twitch, or even Snap. Like I know that not Snapchat, TikTok, and I love your TikToks, but like I feel like I need to get better at TikTok. But like all these new things, I just feel like, I am like burnt out on it because I was doing it 12 years ago. I was such an early adopter to all of that stuff that it's like lost a little bit of luster for me.
You're so like, it's like another platform doing this?
A little bit. Like the novelty of it is, there's not a lot of novelty I feel like I don't mean to sound like better than or something, but like I feel like I'm a little bit past it. It's not new for me. But anyway, I remember I was doing a stand-up for a little thing, like a news thing, for Channel 4. Remember, I was doing some news stuff and like a stand-up, which is where
I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where you talk to the camera. And I remember the producers saying, pretend you're talking to your best friend, because they had like given me, they were like helping me with the script part of it. And I was talking about like I forget what it was. It was like the quartz room or the rose room it was something about like jazz at the Natural History Museum. And I was having trouble making it sound natural. And I think I seemed really stilted talking to the camera. And I was actually thinking about this earlier. And that was an example of something where I was talking to the camera and I did not yet have a lot of experience talking to the camera. And I was not yet at the point where I had a lot of like, hey, you guys, it's me, Alison, whatever. Whereas now it's like, I have no problem just talking to a camera in a very natural way. Mm-hmm. So there was a point where I wasn't good at it. Mm-hmm. Whereas now it is second nature to just talk to the camera like it is a friend. I feel like that didn't answer your question.
No, it does. I think I'm really curious about the TikTok thing now, on what you're going to do with TikTok.
I don't know. My friend Renee is on, her TikToks are like her just talking, kind of just doing like Instagram stories on TikTok. Whereas I feel like if I'm going to be on TikTok, I need to like be like creative, but I don't feel creative. Mm-hmm.
Well, you've got a lot of other channels.
I'm not a video editor.
Well, this is the thing for me with, I got on TikTok basically because I was inspired by my kids. Mm-hmm. So I have two daughters, 13 and 11. And they were, just sort of like from my vantage point, I was like, oh, they're doing like really creative stuff on this thing. And then I started looking at it. And like the video editing tools and all of the stuff within it. And then, the other thing that TikTok owns, CapCut, that video app. I was just like,
what is that?
It's owned by, it's basically like a video editing app that's owned by TikTok.
Didn't know this.
But I was looking at all this stuff, and this is part of like midlife awakening. I won't call it crisis, midlife awakening, where I was just like, and I did a TikTok about this because I was just like, I'm looking at all these tools that if I were like 12-year-old Mark, who was like making Lego movies with my friends mm-hmm. and like putting on shows, like I would have just been so mesmerized that like I could make movies with my phone. Like I had to, when we made movies, this is once again Gen X memories. You had to take 2 VCRs and then you got the mixing console from Radio Shack and you had to connect them together to edit together. Yeah. But like, so I was just like, here we are, grown-ups now, and there's all this cool stuff that our younger selves would have loved to create with. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was just like, why can't I do that now? Like what's, and the kids are getting older. So there's a little more independence, and, the grown-ups can do a little more with that too. So I've thought a lot about that recently, which is like, there's so many, and with audio too, with podcasting and the stuff that we've experimented on the Ursa front, like there's so many, it's just so much easier to make videos and make podcasts now. And it's a lot of fun. So why can't grown-ups and adults do this too?
Yeah, definitely. And I have to get on my high horse.
Is it a soapbox? Or a high horse?
Soapbox. Oh my God. Brain fart. A dead brain fart. I have to get on my soapbox for a second and say, on that front, don't sound like shit on your podcast, people. I recently climbed up a guest's asshole about this, a guest whose audio did not sound good. It is not hard to sound decent. Don't sound bad. A lot of listeners aren't going to notice, but some listeners are going to notice. Don't do it. Sound good. If you have it in your power to sound good, don't not sound good. do sound good. That's I'm getting off my soapbox now. Do you agree, Mark?
Do you have like I mostly agree. But I'll explain so do you have a few quick tips on how to do that inexpensively?
Yeah, if you're recording remotely, record through a USB microphone and QuickTime. Don't record through your computer's built-in microphone. And record through a microphone that's like close to your mouth. Don't record through a microphone that's far away from your mouth. And if someone wants to like reach out to me, I can recommend there's an array of microphones I could recommend. There's like lots of shortcuts that people will use where they're like, I think it's going to sound sufficient. I'm like, it's not going to though. Don't like an echoey room is not good. Try to set your microphone or your computer like on a blanket or something. Yeah. What do you think?
I feel like that is sort of next level pro tips. Like for me, job one is like, the guests, the research, the content of the. Oh,
yeah. No, I guess I'm talking about the next level. Yeah.
You're going next level. But
maybe what I'm saying is if you're going to come on my podcast. No. I'm talking about other people's podcasts too, because I'll listen and I'll think like this person doesn't sound as good as they could. And it bums me out.
Yeah, I know. I think, there are definitely, I will say this though, there are a lot more, this is once again getting to the ease of, and the pandemic accelerated all of this. Yeah. It is so much easier to do a remote podcast now than it was 2 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And there are a lot more tools that help kind of streamline the noise reduction and things like that. So there are tools out there. It's not always going to be perfect. And, but I think, it's getting to a pretty good place. So, if I can get good recording, if I can get like full sentences, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So that's undermining your soapbox.
No, that's fine. I think you're right. I go back and forth with aforementioned Tony, who has abandoned me for an array of places. Like his thing is like, as long as I think, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but like the main thing is the listener wants to be able to hear what the guest is saying. If they can't hear what the guest is saying, that's when they get annoyed. And I'm like, yeah, you're totally right. Because I will sometimes not be able to see the forest for the trees audio wise, where I'm like not even paying attention to what they're saying if the sound quality is like tinny or like sizzly or, like the specific audio quality will like drive me up a wall. Yeah. I don't think that's the vast majority of people, but anyway, this is a total tangent. Okay, so
but this gets into the questions that I have for you about what you've learned from your podcast. Like, because
I can tell you, but let's go back.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, well, I want to go back to what I learned from your post, though, because as someone who does have a Patreon, it was interesting what you were saying about how for a little while you did put some Longreads stuff behind a paywall.
Yep.
And then you realized that for Longreads, it worked better to ask people to support something they believed in as opposed to pay for certain rewards.
For sure.
And that was really interesting to me. I think Patreon is set up a little bit differently in that I do think people like getting specific rewards. But it's interesting. It's something I've been thinking about, I don't know. And then like you look at, a show like You're Wrong About, and I know you're friends with Michael Hobbs, right? Yeah. And like the You're Wrong About Patreon has, tons of members and they don't promise anything. You're just supporting the show.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like in the podcasting world, Patreon and the bonus episode kind of setup, bonus episode plus community setup.
Yeah, it's its own thing.
Really dialed it in. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like once you've got I feel like I've learned so much from you. I've learned so much from Michael Hobbs and You're Wrong About in Maintenance Phase. They've like Patreon, I think, has worked really well on that front, which is like to offer some bonus episodes. But people and that was the thing that I think that, when I left Longreads and Automatic, and it was during the pandemic, and I'm a late comer to podcasting, but just really got into the intimacy of podcasting and wanted to get deeper into it. And we knew we wanted to do something with a podcast with Ursa. And so it was, learning from Michael in terms of like the relationships you built. And I think that works really well for memberships, but I think it does, fundamentally still go back to the same point I was making with Longreads, which was that people really like and are really want you to do well. They want, You're Wrong About in a Maintenance Phase to do well, and they want to support it as like an affinity thing, not as like, oh, I'm going to get exclusive information, which I think, when I was doing it with Longreads, Patreon did not exist. It was like a PayPal button, and I would email people ebooks of our exclusives that they could download onto their Kindle. And so it was also kind of like an awkward user experience to get access to it. And they're like, why don't you just put this on a website and make it free? And and I'll pay you anyway.
Right. And the point you make of like, putting stuff out there that because we want it to grow anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, okay, so let's just get organized for a moment. Okay. Here's the things. I know you have some questions for me, which I'm happy to answer. What I want to know, you got to tell me about Ursa. So we got to talk about that. And then also I want to know if you're open to talking about it. I would like to know, even though I sort of know, but I'm forgetting. I want to know how you met your wife. And I want to know about being a father to two preteen girls and that. And then I want to know about leaving New York and moving to the Bay Area and then Seattle. Those are my questions for you. So however you would like to parse your time, to cover. Go for it. Yes, I know.
I forgot the question.
Tell me about Ursa.
Oh yeah. So this does lead to the Ursa thing because, so Dawnie and I, should I start the whole story over? No, we've been over part of it. So Dawnie and I started chatting. We put together this idea that we wanted to create a platform, short fiction with an emphasis on underrepresented voices. And we were both, really blown away by, the short story collection, Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw, which won a bunch of awards in 2020, 2021. And we were lucky enough to get her involved in Ursa as well. And so we decided to put together as essentially like book club chat anthology podcast. So we launched, it's called Ursa Short Fiction. It launched in June. Season 1 launched in June. We've got a few more episodes left in season 1. Then we'll take a quick break. And then we've got, more stories and conversations coming up, later this year. But it's essentially, Dawnie and Deesha, two brilliant award-winning authors, geeking out on short stories, going deep. So there are book club episodes in which they're going deep on sort of new and classic collections and author interviews. And then we're doing these like fully produced audio stories in which voice actors are performing different short stories.
Oh, cool.
So it's been such a blast to work on. Dawnie and Deesha are fantastic. So they also both grew up in the same hometown, Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, wow.
So, they have that hometown connection. And, so it's just like, whether you are a reader or an aspiring writer, there's kind of something for everybody on that front in terms of going into like the craft of it and also just kind of appreciating the storytelling as a reader. So it's been super fun to work on. And so that's it. Our plan is to keep working on more stories. We want to build this as a platform to showcase emerging writers, and then also sort of, bring out more well-known writers to impart their wisdom as well. And ursastory.com. You can go there to check it all out.
And what do you do?
So I'm working as producer on the product and business side. So Dawnie and Deesha are on the sort of creative curatorial side in terms of stories and authors, and a lot of stuff that I learned from the Longreads experience that I wanted to bring into what Ursa could be, but sort of thinking of it like, there is like a curatorial aspect to it that kind of is similar to what Longreads aimed for, but it is like about basically giving people an entry point to great stories that they might not have heard about otherwise. And short stories are kind of an interesting thing because it's not, it's not a sort of a common habit to just read short stories. And it's very hard to like find them in different places, even though it's just like, there's so many great stories out there and so many amazing writers out there. So, so we thought it was like really important to, bring out these stories, produce them well, but also give the context on the stories and help, bring people into them. So yeah, a lot of good stuff so far. It's been fun.
I love short stories, but I find that there's like an inertia to diving into them. Do you have that? You probably don't have that.
Oh, I do. I mean, my background is journalism and nonfiction. So like, I knew more about that than I knew about short stories. But I think it's just the way, there's a whole machine around the publishing industry and novels and how they're marketed and how they're presented on social media. And that machine does not exist for short stories. There are a lot of these like amazing literary magazines and nonprofits that, give out awards and do that kind of stuff. But, the mechanism is not there as much, in terms of like spotlighting stories and giving people an introduction to them. So that's something that we felt like we could do something that helps add to that and bring something to the table like that.
Did you read that? I forget where it ran, but did you read Bad Art Friend?
Yeah, I read that. Mm-hmm.
That was compelling.
That was, I think, this is not your point, but that was, I think, one of the points where I was like, I should not be spending this much time on Twitter anymore.
I know.
Right? Like Twitter is like when I started Longreads, it was a very different place. Twitter was a very different place than it is today. And obviously like, the whole Trump era is one piece of it. But also just like, I think I blame the algorithm and the way they changed the product for a lot of the reasons it became so angry and toxic.
Yes.
So I just like, stories like that where people just, really just getting deeply invested on Twitter. Did you go through that with that?
Did I go through
like,
what?
Did you get deeply invested in that story?
Bad Art Friend. I found it sort of entertaining, and I think I had opinion. I can't remember now what my opinion was, but I had an opinion about who was the bad art friend, and but I don't know. I don't think I was consumed by it. I don't think I was reading that much on Twitter about it.
And you're not really a Twitter person, like.
Oh no, I am.
Oh, you're super.
I spend a lot of time on Twitter. Yeah.
Do you have a similar feeling about it, or what is your Twitter take?
Yeah, I am, and maybe this is almost like protective in a way. I don't get a lot of engagement on Twitter. I have a lot of followers on Twitter, but when I tweet, like not a lot happens, and I don't know why. And maybe it is an algorithm thing. It's like I follow this woman, And she will complain about going viral. And it sounds like I'm bitching about her, and I'm not. Like, for some reason, she's in some like algorithm situation where her name is, I forget her name. She writes for McSweeney's and some others, but like she's in some algorithm situation where her tweets keep going viral. And because they go viral, they're like tweets about parenting. And they'll go, and they're funny, and they'll go viral, and then she'll get all these people saying all this negative stuff to her in like the kind of really annoying way. And I look at that versus my tweets where it's like handful of people respond, handful of people like them, handful of people retweet them, but it's like not the same at all. And I think it's just like not that many eyes are on them. There's so much stuff going by on Twitter. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, like I said, I have a lot of followers, but like, there's not very much engagement. So, I don't know. It's like you get in what you get out what you put in. So if I engage in a negative way, which I'm prone to do, then it can become very annoying very quickly. Like if I talk about COVID stuff or political stuff, which like I said, or gun stuff, which or abortion stuff, which I am very inclined to do too often, then it gets really annoying really fast for me. Yeah, no, it's like, it's not a good place for me, but I spend too much time there anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that was another reason. Like I was like, I'm spending too much time on Twitter, and, I saw, and I'm not saying TikTok is better. TikTok probably has it,
No, but it does feel like a more enriching, wholesome place. It definitely does.
Yeah. For me, it was just like, oh, this is, it was also like there's an evergreen nature to the content that's made there. So it's kind of interesting in that way. But it was like just sort of another reason where I was like, oh, I need to go explore what else is out there in the world. Like, mm-hmm. I think there is like, if you have success with something, like with Longreads, it was for me, stepping away was a good chance. Like, okay, I need to like go see, what else is happening in the world on these other social networks. Like I was deeply invested in Twitter for a very long time. And that's prevented me from seeing all these other cool things that are out there in the world that you can do creative stuff with.
Yes. Twitter does feel like I'm like staring at my own navel. Like I don't feel like it's just, I like feeling like I know what's happening news-wise very rapidly. Like I know what the conversation is, even though I don't know it in any depth. But I feel like that's just a rationale for just scrolling, endless scrolling, Mm-hmm. It doesn't deepen anything. It's almost a compulsion. Twitter is a compulsion for me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So can I,
yes.
I know you have more questions for me, but can I ask you
yes.
about your podcasting? Because
mm-hmm.
you are, and I mentioned this before we started recording, you're prolific. As someone who is now producing podcasts, it's just like really impressive.
Oh, thank you.
What you do and the frequency in which you do it. And so I'm like, just sort of curious what your kind of like broader feeling is about how you podcast and what you like about it.
That is a very, very broad question.
Too broad.
What I like about it, I mean, I love it. I love it as a medium. I love being able to connect with people and talk to them and interview them. I love being able to be myself on microphone, and express myself. I love the connection with the listeners. I love, having different shows that kind of have a different personality. And even within Alison Rosen is Your New Best Friend, there's the Monday show that has its own personality, then the Thursday show, and then Patreon. I yeah, you know, I think that the podcast landscape is changing a bit. There's a ton more celebrity hosted podcasts, which you've probably noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And the people, the like old school podcasters, of which I would consider myself one of them, a conversation that we have sometimes is like, what is happening?
Mm-hmm.
So many of us are a little bit like, uh-oh. In that it does feel like it really is changing, and every celebrity is now has a podcast, and are, you know, what will that mean for all of us? That is a conversation that you hear all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of interesting. I don't spend that much time thinking about that, but when we get together, when we have our special get-togethers, that's what we talk about. And yeah.
But it does remind me, I mean, there was some article about the podcasting industry looking for its next hit. I just feel like it just reminds me so much of the early blogging days where like a certain amount of it, you know, attempts to professionalize, but like at its core, these are still democratized tools that anyone, and even easier than ever to make one. So it takes is the drive to do it, and to do it consistently.
Yes.
And so that's something you've done really well.
Well, that's the thing is that, I mean, thank you very much. That's the thing is that, yes, there, you know, all these, any, you know, celebrity can come in and start a podcast. Are they going to continue it? Mm-hmm. Are they going to have that relationship with their listeners? We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Okay. So you had more questions for me.
Yes. How did you meet your wife?
So funny thing, this goes back to our early New York days, which is like, living in LA and people introducing the people. So long story short is I ended up sort of falling in with a bunch of, people from the Pacific Northwest when I moved to New York. A lot of people from Seattle, basically through one friend introduction, ended up meeting all of these people from Seattle. And, one of them eventually was my wife.
There you go.
And so we got married in New York. Both of our kids were born in New York. And then 2012, we moved to the West Coast. I took a job at a startup called Pocket, which was like an Instapaper, like mobile reading app.
Yes, I remember that. How did you go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, how did you feel about leaving New York? How did she feel?
I think we were both ready, just because, you know, the kids were very little. I mean, we ended up back in Manhattan. And so we were, you know, going to Central Park a lot, Central Park Zoo, just a lot of like great memories there. But both of our families are on the West Coast. I'm from California. She's from Seattle area. So it was kind of like we were ready to go back to the West Coast and be near family. So we ended up in the Bay Area for a few years, and then we moved to Seattle 6 years ago. So we've been in Seattle since.
Do you like Seattle?
I do like Seattle. There's your upcoming Go F Yourself segment will include some problems I have about Seattle.
Oh boy, I can't wait. And now an important question: the sound baffles on your wall, that are green. Did you paint those, or did they come green?
They came green.
Nice.
You want to get
I like
some?
it. Looks good.
I don't know how much they do. Mm-hmm. This is little fun fact here. I'm actually in a laundry room.
Are you?
Yeah. We got side-by-side washer dryer right below me.
I would never know. I thought you had a little studio.
Well, it is. It's a little studio
and a laundry room.
And a laundry room.
Nice.
It does it all.
Wow. And did you always know that you wanted to have kids?
Yeah. Did you?
Yes, I did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I mean, 5 and 3 is a great time. 1311 is a great time as well. But like, we're now at the point where I am limited in terms of the stories and the anecdotes that I'm allowed to tell on Gen X podcasts without like written approval. So
right.
You don't get a bunch of like free social media content from all your fun kid anecdotes. You can't just like quote your kids about something funny.
Although I wonder where the line is. I mean, a lot of people put emojis over their kids' faces and I don't. And like, I wonder, am I being a bad mom? And I don't know, at a certain point, I'm going to have to not do it anymore. And I don't mean because of like them being like, Mom, I just mean because I'm going to go like, well, that's not cool for me to do that anymore.
The other great thing about, the kids these days and their TikToks is, I have found that like, I mean, Stranger Things is part of this too. It's like, they're all into 80s music now. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, let's put on my 80s playlist now. Let's play our music in the car. And, or things like I found out that the Weezer Blue album is now like an internet meme, or maybe this is something everyone already knew, but so they're like, you grew up listening to Weezer?
They think we're cool.
I don't know if they think we're cool, actually, but it was a little bit of disbelief that Weezer had been around that long.
Are you still playing music?
That's another pandemic activity that I picked back up, was just like, I'm going to, try and get better at guitar, and I just want to play music again. So just looking for opportunities to do that. What about you?
So not really, but in 2020, I did a live show at Sketchfest, and the Angoras reunited as like a surprise. And it was so much fun. We played 2 songs, and it was really, 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 really fun. That was the last time though.
Now, are they all in Southern California?
No. So Paula, our singer, is in Seattle actually, and she plays in a band called The Heels. Tim, our drummer, is in Portland, and he's in a band up there. And then Yami, our bass player, is down in Orange County.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so everyone's all spread out.
I do. I miss music so much, and it's been really fun to play it again. Do you like practice guitar? Do you play any of this stuff?
No, not really. I mean, after the Angoras like in the lead up to reuniting with them, I was practicing. And so I have the guitar, accessible, and I was like, I'm going to get back into it. But I didn't actually do that. So.
Yeah.
But the intention was to do it, but I didn't do it.
Yeah. I've played a couple open mic nights with a couple neighborhood dads here in Seattle. Oh yeah. But the thing that I realized, which is a thing that I realized about, so I did my own podcast very briefly.
Yes,
it is on hiatus at the moment, but everything I learned, you can enjoy the back catalog of 7 episodes, wherever you get your podcasts. So, but the thing I learned about that is a similar thing to what I'm learning about music, which is like, if I am only doing an activity by myself, it is going nowhere. Like I need collaborators. Like I need to join a band, or if I'm doing a podcast, I need to find collaborators and partners with it, because it's not gonna work. The energy is not gonna work if I'm just holding myself to my own deadlines, because I will blow those deadlines every time.
Yeah.
Do you find the same thing? Because you have a whole team.
Kinda. Do I find that? No, maybe a little bit. I mean, like I also kind of chafe at other people holding me accountable sometimes. So yes and no. Like it probably does work better if I have someone holding me accountable, but then also I get frustrated a little bit by it. So it kind of, the deciding factor for me is like how into it I am, I guess. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if it's something I'm into and there's someone else depending on me, then that is good.
That's a good combo. Yeah.
So are you still in touch with like Hal from, Tear Us Apart? Is that what you guys were called?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. I keep in touch with all of those, all of my old bandmates. And all the various bands that people have been in since. It's, but it is like, once again, Gen X memories. Like, just the advance of technology and how much easier it is to record music now and make music. Like, I've been teaching myself Ableton too, which is like, so much cool stuff out there. So it's just like, okay, if I can break out of, whatever everyone expects of people over 40, which is they never listen to anything new ever again. There's a lot of cool stuff out there.
Right. Nice. So let's do your Hey, Go Fuck Yourself.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay. So Seattle, I love Seattle. But also there are some issues. There's a thing called the Seattle freeze.
Yes, I've heard of this.
Yeah. So I think that's a real thing. This is not really a rant about that. I think it's been hard for me to kind of break down Seattle freeze versus just like, when you're older, it's just harder to make friends and, get to know people in the way you did in like your 20s. So, but I will say there is kind of a standoffishness and a politeness, which leads me to the way they drive here. So Seattle drivers have this thing where it drives me nuts, where they are dangerously polite with the way they drive. So you've got a road, maybe you're going to cross it when the coast is clear, but there is no crosswalk. You've got the car coming. Now you can tell me how you feel about this. It could be, is it me or everyone as well? Car pulls up and they will stop for you and like wave you across.
Mm-hmm.
And it bothers me to no end because they can't control all of the other traffic that may be coming around behind them. And so it is a very dangerous, polite pause that's happening there. So I want to tell dangerously polite Seattle drivers,
hey, go fuck yourself.
Right. Because they're saying to you, go ahead and get run over. Right?
Yeah. Well, they're only in control of their car. They can't control any of the other cars.
Right. They have decided that it's safe for me to cross.
Risk. And then I'm feeling this pressure to like cross. It's like, we don't have a quorum here.
Right. So then what do you do? They've called your bluff.
They have. Well, it's just depends on whether you want to take your life in your hands. And
I feel like it's actually really passive aggressive of what they're doing.
Now there are differing opinions. Some people don't think it's that big a deal. So
is your wife one of them?
I'm not going to name names.
It feels like she might be. That's my sense of just what just happened in that moment. Yes, the Seattle freeze. It's funny. I had never heard of that. But I did Bumbershoot in 2015, I think. And that's when I became acquainted with the term, the Seattle freeze. All right. Do you have a Just Me or Everyone?
Yeah, I do have a Just Me or Everyone as well. Let me pull up my notes here.
Is it just me or everyone?
Okay. Is it just me? Or do you find that you are more likely to cry during a movie when you are watching it on a plane?
Yes! I feel strongly that I am. What?
What's up with that?
Such a good one. What is that?
Like, I'll cry during, like, the Marvel movies.
Yeah. It's so weird. And it always makes me go, like, is it something about the pressure in the cabin? Like, or is it about being pulled away from my home, away from my family, except that it happens even when I'm on a plane with my family. It is so weird, but
is there like a nostalgia factor with flying?
Yes, my tears are so like just right behind my eyeballs when I'm on a plane.
Just being so moved during like a mindless rom-com.
I think I cried during Panic Room. Is that a tearful movie? I don't know. It's so weird. Yes. Yes. I can't. That's got to be everyone, right?
It's got to be everyone. We're gonna have to. I didn't Google that before, so maybe it's already. There are probably a bunch of internet threads about it already.
Well, I feel like if we Google these, there's probably like a Quora or something.
Yeah.
but I don't trust that. Or Yahoo Answers. I don't trust that. That's a good question. Yeah. It's weird.
I feel like we're only scraping the surface here, but I thought I had other questions for you, Alison.
You did. You emailed them to me. Would you like me to look them up?
I have them here. Let's go over. I think we've hit them, actually. Like, I wanted to ask you about the Angoras Era. I want to talk about that era because that was before you moved to New York.
That's right.
How long were you together as a band?
Well, so we got together in 97 and then we broke up in 2002 when I moved to New York.
Got it.
They stayed together, but I left. So yeah. But the whole time I was like such a shitty band member, attitude wise, because the whole time I was like, I'm not really here. Like, I'm not really going to be living in Orange County. This is an accident. I mean, I didn't say it this way, but that's my general vibe was like, it's an accident that I'm somehow in Orange County again after college because my intention was never to be in Orange County again for a long time. So don't count on me. Bye. Bye-bye.
So you feel like you had like one foot out the door the entire time you were in the band?
Yes. Yes. Even though I took a job at the OC Weekly and I lived in an apartment there. And so I did, form relationships and roots there and stuff. Again, I, on some level, did have one foot out the door and I always planned on leaving. And I felt like what's happening, I wanted to leave. So eventually I did, obviously leave, but yeah, I was never really really committed, which I think is okay though in a band that you play in after college. But for two of them, the ones who are in the bands now, they really wanted to make music happen. Like that was their passion. So I think that's probably a drag to be with someone who's like, doesn't take it as seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's really hard to have all 4 or 5 people on the same page, both in terms of like the business and the career side of it, and then creatively too.
Yeah. Right. So I was bringing in songs and like musically I was pulling my weight, but in terms of like flyering and other stuff, I was not pulling my weight. I did not have a passion for passing out flyers. I always thought that was a waste of time. And I was open about that.
That's how you get the word out. How are you going to get the people to the show?
I know. Did you like passing out flyers?
No, we didn't do a lot of that. New York was a weird place to. Oh
yeah, I guess flyers in New York, you don't have to do that.
And you, I was in a few bands in New York. And got to play Mercury Lounge. I was kind of like, got to the Mercury Lounge point. And that's so cool. I was happy with that. But also just like, it was just so fun and met so many great people through that too. Like, I do miss that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I miss New York.
You miss New York?
I do. I have, I haven't been back since my kids were born.
Oh, wow.
I haven't been there in years and years.
Okay.
I'll take them someday. They'll see it.
Yeah.
That'll be exciting.
I definitely we need to bring the kids back to New York at some point. They were both born there. So they've been back, but they're dyou for another visit to just check in and make sure they know they're New Yorkers.
Their roots. Did you have other questions from your list?
I feel like I did, but it was a lot of the podcasting stuff, which I think we covered. I do feel like we have a lot of catching up to still do because I know
we do.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. You had mentioned like wanting to make sense of living in New York in the early aughts. And I feel like that's a separate conversation. Like we're going to obviously have to have more conversations.
Mm-hmm. And how do you like LA, in terms of family and being there? And
yeah, it's good. I mean, we have a house and I lived in, technically Hancock Park, but it's more Hollywood. Because I feel like when you say Hancock Park, people think of like stately mansions and stuff, and it was not that. We lived there for 5 years. We rented there, and that's where Elliot was born. And then we looked for a house forever, and then finally found a house we like in Burbank. And I don't ever wish we lived like more in the center of things. Like I like living in the valley, and it's nice. And I like living here. I mean, occasionally, especially during the pandemic, though, I was like, it's so hot here, and I do not like living in this kind of climate. And it is not beautiful. And why do I not live in like a nice, beautiful place when I could really live anywhere? Why am I here? I think a lot of people had that thought during the pandemic, though. But overall, yes, it's good. I like it.
And you were doing all remote podcasts, but you've gone back to in-person stuff. So you're not like, oh, we did remote, let's do that going forward. You still like the in-person aspect of all that.
Yes. At different times, I did go back to in-person, and then I would like freak out because I would hear of, a lot of people getting COVID suddenly. But now more and more back to in-person, and it's just like night and day. I mean, it's just so nice to be in person again. But like with Upworthy Weekly, I've never even met my co-host Todd in person. He's in Long Beach. So in certain ways, like it just makes more sense to stay remote. Prior to the pandemic, I would be offered great guests, but they're in New York. And I would say, oh, I only do in person. Like I had a strict in person only policy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just felt like I just didn't want to deal with the technical difficulties. I didn't really know how to do it remote and make it sound good. So I had to get over that.
But you do feel like in person, there is like, you feel like that dynamic helps a lot?
I do. But I will do, remote podcasts where I'm like, I feel like that was really good. I feel like it's totally fine. But then I'll do one in person, and it's just like, it's just easier. It's just easier because there's less like intellectualizing. That's not really exactly the word I mean. What am I trying to think? What am I trying to say? It can be much more, for me as an interviewer, it can feel much more organic. I don't have to like be in my head very much about it, and I can just go based off of my gut feeling, versus on Zoom, I think because I can't intuit as much, it feels like a more cerebral exercise because I'm not feeding off of like vibes, let's say,
Yeah.
Like in the room, it's much more of a energy thing. But it's like, thank God we have the ability to do it so easily remotely.
Yeah.
I'll probably always continue to do that to some degree because it like opens up the world so much. It's so much more convenient. And I will say, as a guest, there are times where it's like definitely easier to just do it to be remote.
Yeah. We've been doing Ursa entirely remote.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
You use Riverside, right?
Yep. We use riverside.fm. That's not a sponsored endorsement, but yeah, there's like Riverside. Squadcast is another one where you can record the audio locally. It's worked pretty well. Yeah,
we've been using Riverside for Upworthy Weekly. And I know it, for them, I think it's easier to like have the video and the audio concurrently. To churn out the video with the audio. It's easier. So
with this, are you putting this on YouTube as well?
Yes, but we will then take the video and marry it to the podcast audio.
Got
It's
it.
an extra step versus Riverside, which pumps it out together.
Yeah. Yeah. We have not done video at all.
Oh, I see.
But I have sort of mixed feelings about it because obviously like YouTube's a great place and all of that stuff too. But I do think a lot about like the just preserving the intimacy of audio question.
It's a constant conversation that I find myself having with guests. I have a lot to, well, I don't have a lot to say about that, but I do have thoughts about that. No one really enjoys the video. No, people enjoy watching the video aspect of it, but I think most guests probably on some level would prefer to just not be doing video anyway. So I don't know. I shouldn't say that.
I've hated every second of it. Thank you.
That's me. That's not the video. That's just mine. That's me.
No, it's it's wonderful. I haven't,
It was so nice catching up with you, Mark. Thank you for letting me take up your entire evening.
This was fantastic. Thank you again for having me, Alison. It's so great to catch up.
Tell everyone where they should go, what they should look out for, where to find you online, etc.
Okay. Everybody should go listen to Ursa Short Fiction, and you can go find it wherever you get your podcasts, or go to ursastory.com. You can follow me on Twitter if I'm still hanging out on Twitter at Mark Arms, or markarms.com is my website.
Perfect. And if you like what you're hearing, or even if you don't, make sure you're subscribed. Alison Rosen is your new best friend. Wherever you listen to podcasts, leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts or wherever. Click 5 stars. I read them on the show in a segment called iTunes Comments of the Week, although technically Apple Podcasts Comments of the Week. Follow me on social media at Alison Rosen on Twitter and Instagram. I am on Patreon, patreon.com/Alison Rosen. All sorts of bonus stuff there, bonus episodes of The Friend Zone. That's my Patreon podcast. There's a level where you can text me and I'll text you back. I do live streams and all sorts of stuff. And then also, what am I forgetting? I'm on Cameo, Upworthy Weekly, and Childish. Those are my other podcasts. I know I'm leaving some stuff out, but that's okay because I'll just mention it next time. Thank you so much for listening. Mark, thank you so much. This was super fun. Listeners, thank you for listening. I love you. You matter. Goodbye.
Hey, do you know about the Alison Rosen Show? We had a good time, but now we gotta go.